Lawsuit over its map services. That's coming from a North Carolina family claiming their loved one drove into a creek and drowned while following Google's route guidance. Philip Paxson, a husband and father of 2 kids, died last September while driving home from his daughter's 9th birthday party in Hickory. The lawsuit alleges Google Maps routed him to a bridge that collapsed nearly a decade ago and was never fixed. Plaintiff Alicia Paxson says the Snow Creek Bridge was unmarked and unbarricaded on the rainy night her husband drove off the edge and fell 20 feet into the creek. Her lawsuit also says Google was aware of the bridge's collapse but failed to update its maps. In a statement, Google told Scripps News it has the, quote, deepest sympathies for the Paxson family and is reviewing their lawsuit. But to dig into this a bit more, we're joined now by attorney Bernard Alexander. Bernard, thank you for being on Scripps News Live. This is really a story. I've never heard of something like this before. So I want to ask you off the top here. You know, the bridge had been broken down for 9 years before Philip Paxson's death last fall. How does that long time period impact this case?
Well, that's really the issue of notice. 9 years is a long time for a dangerous condition like this to exist. My understanding is that the community had made complaints to Google for a long period of time, so Google was on notice of the condition being there and didn't correct it. They basically have a map that they advertise to people to say, please use this map. They know that people are going to be using it, and they know that people are going to be relying on it. This incident occurred at 11 o'clock at night, where the driver would have no way of knowing that the bridge is out. They're simply following the instructions on the map, and they fall down into a ditch. So you've got a duty to make sure your maps are accurate, a breach of duty, a failure to make sure that the map is accurate, and then causation. As a result of this bad mapping that had this person drive over a bridge that wasn't in existence, someone unfortunately lost their life.
Yeah, I mean, as you explain that, where does individual responsibility come into play here? Does it?
Well, in terms of the driver doesn't have any way of knowing. You know, during the daytime, you might be able to say he'd be able to see something, he'd know. But the driver has no way of knowing at night. They're following the Google Maps and assuming that it's going to be correct. So you'd expect a couple of things. If the bridge is out, you'd expect to be some warning, some type of signage, some type of barricade that would tell you this isn't safe. And you'd expect that to occur. Obviously, Google doesn't have responsibility for that. The owner of the property has an obligation to make sure it's safe for individuals. In this instance, the owner had an obligation to put a barricade there. Apparently, the owners had left this condition for quite a bit of time. So the next question is the public entity that has responsibility for this area. Why didn't the public entity require them at the point when they stopped working on the bridge to correct it, or if they didn't, put barricades there so someone would know?
Well,
so
let me interject here, because actually we do know that the road where this incident took place was actually not maintained by the state's Department of Transportation. Usually you think it's a public situation. It's actually considered a private road. So with that information, this being private, how does that impact the case? Well,
it's a private road, but at some point, 9 years later, the government entity that is surrounding that, they have a way of knowing that it's there. So it's one thing if it happens and it's only been in existence for a year or 6 months or something like that. But after 9 years, you'd think that the government entity would say, regardless of the fact it's not a responsibility, we're going to either put some barrier up or contact the owners and get them to put something up, because it is a dangerous condition and it's serious enough so that some action should be taken.
Yeah, and just adding, residents in the area were saying that they had been pushing for more signs and notices around the bridge since 2013, just to the point of what you were saying. Is there a precedent for this type of case?
Well, there is in several senses. You know, when you drive down the freeway, you see trucks that block the on-ramps and on and off-ramps whenever there's work being done. And you see trucks that stand along and they basically create a barrier. That's on public property. On private property, you have the same issue. The government entity finds out that there's a dangerous condition, even if it's on private property. They send out notices to say, hey, you need to correct this. So with regard to the owners of the property, something should have been done to correct it. Once it was clear the owners of the property weren't doing anything, seems like the governmental entity should have at least sent out notices or done something at some point to protect the public, their citizens. And then with regard to Google, clearly they should have corrected it so this gentleman wasn't driving cross that bridge at the time. There should be a duty to check to make sure that the maps are accurate, make sure that there are no conditions that would cause someone harm. And in this instance, where you receive notice from members of the public that there was a dangerous condition, you would have hoped that Google would have done something to correct it. In their own statements, they say we try and make sure our maps are accurate. In this instance, it's clear the map wasn't accurate. They're on notice that it wasn't, and they should have had some fix for that, either something saying you can't use this bridge, an alarm or a warning, or something so that individuals wouldn't end up driving down this location, particularly at night.
With all that being said, how do you see this case playing out? Because you've given us great context on what happened, what should have happened. Where does this end up?
It seems to me it's a clear liability case with regard to Google because you have a cause and effect relationship. This individual would not have been on the bridge but for the map that they were using through Google. So that's pretty much easy. The issue is going to be with regard to the owners. For some reason, they didn't correct the condition. They didn't put warnings out, so they are on the hook. It's unclear whether they are currently, what the current status of the owners are. With regard to the governmental entity, it's a further stretch, but still, once the government is on notice of this dangerous condition and knows that it was a bridge that could potentially be used, there's some potential for liability with the governmental entity. And you'll see the creativity of the plaintiff's attorneys in order to get to that deep pocket.
All right, Bernard Alexander, thank you very much for your time, your insight. And again, folks, Google told Scripps News that it has the deepest sympathies for the Paxton family and is reviewing their lawsuit. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back,